Hey there, welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. We are live here on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, all the places. And we are moving forward with our book club, right? So we are kind of going through the Allan Kardec Spiritism Codex series. We've already read his first book, which is the Spirits book. We read his second book, which is the Mediums book. And now we are reading the Gospel According to Spiritism, which is his third book. Now, if you guys are joining us for the first time, just know that the previous books can be found on my YouTube channel if you want to go back and listen to them, but they are not a requirement to listen in on tonight's conversation, okay? So we're on chapter 11 here in the Gospel According to Spiritism. And so just a brief recap, what we do is, or what the book does, is it takes passages from the Bible that are kind of central to Christian theology. And then it breaks it down from the perspective of Spiritism. And it also gives revelation from the spirits themselves about those particular passages. So why is this important? I don't think I've ever actually said why this is important. Like, why bother interpreting, a Christian Bible? And what we need to understand is that, this was coinciding at the same time. Christianity, Catholicism, and all the different denominations therein were dominant at the time. And so for this to come up, and for this to, make waves within the community, it first needs to approach them where they are, and where people were at that time was in a Christian mindset. So this is why we do it this way. All right. So chapter 11 is called Loving One's Neighbor as Oneself. Okay. And the subcategories within this chapter is the greatest commandment, doing unto others what we would want them to do unto us. The parable of the creditors and the debtors. And then, of course, the Spirit's teachings. And the Spirit's teachings are going to go over the law of love, selfishness, faith and charity, charity towards criminals, and should we risk our life for a criminal? So those are the categories that the spirits are going to kind of go deeper into. So let's get into it. So the greatest commandment, doing unto others what we would want them to do unto us. The parable of the creditors and debtors. Here we go. We are going to be reading from, I believe it's Matthew 22, verse 34 to 40, and Luke 6, verse 34, and then Matthew once again, chapter 18, verses 23 to 35. And then it's going to go into the interpretation. So the Pharisees, having learned, before I start, now that I look at this, it's like really in small font. Let me fix this really quick. Here we go. The Pharisees, having learned that he had shut the mouths of the Sadducees, gathered together, and one of them, a doctor of the law, came to him to ask him this question in order to test him. Master, which is the greatest commandment of the law? And Jesus answered him, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And this is the second, which is similar to it. You shall love your neighbor as yourselves. All the law and the prophets are contained in these two commandments. Do unto men everything you would want them to do unto you, for such is the law and the prophets. Treat all men as you would want them to treat you. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants, and having begun to do so, one was presented to him who owed him tens and thousands of talents. But since he did not have the means to repay him, his master ordered him, his wife, his children, and everything he owned to be sold in order to satisfy the debt. The servant, throwing himself at his feet, begged him, saying, Lord, have a little patience. I will repay you in full, I promise. And then the servant's master was touched with compassion and allowed him to go, and he forgave his debt. However, having barely left, the servant met one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He took him by the throat and nearly strangled him and said, Pay me what you owe. His fellow servant threw himself at his feet and begged him, saying, Have a little patience. I will repay you in full, I promise. But the other did not want to listen to him, and upon leaving, had him put in prison to be kept there until he paid what he was owed. When his other fellow servants saw what had happened, they were extremely upset and informed their master about everything that had occurred. Then the master had the first servant brought to him and said, You wicked servant, I exempted you from all that you owed me because you begged me. Thus, you should have also had the mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you. And the master, enraged, handed him over to the jailers until he paid everything he owed. It is thus that my Father who is in heaven will treat you, if from the bottom of your hearts you do not forgive your brother for the wrongs he has committed against you. So that's the passages from like the Bible, right? That's the parts that we're going to kind of break down from the perspective of Spiritism, right? So here we go. So this idea of loving one's neighbor as oneself or doing unto others what we would want them to do unto us is the most complete expression of charity that there is, because it sums up all of our duties towards our neighbor. One could not have a surer guide in this respect than taking a measure the commandment that one should do unto others what one desires for oneself. By what right would one demand from one's fellow beings better behavior, more indulgence, benevolence, dedication than what one shows towards them? The practice of these maxims leads to the destruction of selfishness. When people finally take them as a rule for their conduct and as a foundation for their institutions, they will understand true fraternity and will enable peace and justice to reign among them. There will be neither hatred nor dissension, but only unity, harmony, and mutual benevolence. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? So this is going to be a passage from Matthew 22, verse 15 to 22. And then the Pharisees, having gone out, decided amongst themselves to ensnare him in his own words. And thus they sent to him their disciples with Herodians to say to him, Master, we know that you are truthful and that you teach the way of God through the truth, without regard for whomever one might be, because you do not take into consideration men's positions. So tell us your opinion on this. Should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? Jesus, however, knowing their malice, said to them, You hypocrites, why are you testing me? Show me the coin we use for tax. And having presented him with a denarius, Jesus said to them, Whose image on this inscription is this? Caesar's, they said to him. And then Jesus answered them, Then render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render what is God's to God. Having heard him speak like this, they marveled at his response, and leaving him, they went away. So the question posed to Jesus was motivated by the fact that the Jews dreaded the tax imposed on them by the Romans and thus had made it into a religious issue. So let me pause there really quickly, because that word, the Jews, the way that it was written in this sentence, it sounded very venomous. And I just kind of want to come in here and kind of remind everyone, right, when this was written, the people, who was writing it, there in the whatever the racial biases were at that time, just be mindful of that, right? This isn't the part that we take for Codex. This is just, the background, right? A large political party had been formed to repel the tax. The payment of the tax was thus a current matter of outrage for them. Otherwise, the question they put to Jesus, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not, would not have made any sense. The question was a trap because depending on his response, they hoped to incite either the Roman authorities or the Jewish descendants against him. But Jesus, knowing their malice, eluded the problem and gave them a lesson in justice by telling them to pay to each what was owed. The maxim, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, should not be understood in a restrictive and absolute manner. Like all Jesus' teachings, it is general principles summed up in a practical and usual form deduced from a particular circumstance. This principle is a consequence of the one that suggests acting towards others as we would want them to act towards us. It condemns all physical or moral harm caused to others and any violation of their interests. It prescribes respect for others' rights, just as each one desires his or her own rights to be respected. It extends to the fulfillment of duties contracted towards family and society and authorities, as well as towards individuals. So to kind of bring this into more layman's terms, because again, we're reading it from a perspective of a French scientist and mathematician and college professor and a brilliant mind of his time. I think what people need to understand in this is that we're talking about microcosms and macrocosms, right? What happens here on Earth is a reflection of what's going on in the skies. And so when we create a society, right, and we put people in charge to sort of keep things in order, and we entrust in them the power of keeping things in order and keeping things safe, then that is a institution that we've created here on Earth as a mimic, as a microcosm of what we would do with God, right? If God was like a person, right? So what they're saying here is that everyone is owed respect. And so if you put this person in power and this person has enacted taxes, then you owe that motherfucker. Like, there's no, what do you want me to say? You did this. You created this system. You put these people in power. They are enacting their power. Now you must follow their rules because that is what you decided. But it's more so not an act of punishment, but a reflection on how everything we do, right, is a spiritual act, from getting dressed in the morning to, which teachers we have in our schools, all the way up to who governs us, and who tells us our science and our news, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through these things, because yes, it is about caring for your neighbor and seeing them as yourselves and not doing unto others and giving everyone their due respect. It is about that, but it is also within the framework of community, right? Because we're not isolated islands. We function with each other, right? We're social beings. And so when you have this in mind, it literally leaks into all areas of your life. So just keep that in mind, okay? So now we're moving into the part about the Spirit's teachings, right? And we have the subcategories of what they wanted to talk about. So the first one is the law of love. And this passage is written by the spirit of Lazare. And he said this in Paris in 1862. Love summarizes Jesus' doctrine in its entirety because it is the sentiment par excellence, and the sentiments are the instincts raised to the height of the degree of progress accomplished. At their origin, humans have only instincts. More advanced and corrupted, they have only sensations. More educated and purified, they have sentiments. The exquisite apex of sentiment is love. Not love in the ordinary sense of the term, but that inner sun that condenses and joins at its ardent focal point all superhuman aspirations and revelations. The law of love replaces the personality with the union of all beings and extinguishes societal misery. Happy are they who, overcoming their human nature, love with a great love their brothers and sisters in suffering. Happy are they who love, for they know neither the anguish of the soul nor of the body. Their feet are light, and they live as though transported outside of themselves. So when Jesus spoke the divine word love, it made people tremble. It made martyrs. It inebriated people with hope. It was a descent into the arena. Spiritism, in turn, has come to speak a second word of the divine alphabet. Pay attention, for that word lifts the headstones from the empty graves. Reincarnation, which, triumphing over death, reveals to astonished people their intellectual heritage. This word no longer leads them to torment, but to the conquest of their own being, elevated and transfigured, blood redeemed by the Spirit, and today the Spirit must redeem people from matter. I stated that, at their origin, humans had only instincts, and therefore, those in whom the instincts dominate are closer to their starting point than to their goal. In order to advance towards the goal, they must overcome the instincts for the sake of the sentiments. That is, perfect the sentiments while dominating the latent seeds of matter. The instincts are the germination and the embryos of the sentiment. They bring with them progress, just as the acorn contains the oak. And less advanced individuals are those who, riding themselves very slowly, only little by little, ridding themselves slowly of their cocoon, remain enslaved to their instincts. The spirit must be cultivated like a field. All future wealth depends on today's labor, and much more besides earthly goods. Labor will bring you glorious elevation. It is then that comprehending the law of love that unites all beings, you shall find in it the sweet joys of the soul, which are preludes to the joys of heaven. So Lazar pretty much just said what I had just said right before, that we don't live in an isolated island. We live in an ecosystem, right? We live in a society. But if you approach this society, obviously with these two commandments that they spoke about earlier in the chapter, but also approach it from the perspective that love needs to be the governing energy, right? And that the instincts of our basic animalistic, reptilian brain, right? The basic energy is the energy of instinct, right? It's a raw primal emotion. What they're saying here is when they say overcoming or overpowering matter, they're not saying get rid of matter, right? Because we are in our bodies, and our bodies are temples, right? We have organs, we have feelings, we have relationships. Matter matters, right? So they're not saying getting rid of it. They're saying taking the base emotions of your material self and use them as catalysts. These are jumping off points. These are seeds, right? So, for example, your base emotion of rage, right? Rage is a very meaty emotion, right? It's a very heavy one. It's a very passionate one, right? When you go see a therapist about your rage problem, your therapist is not going to say, oh, suppress that rage, or get rid of that rage, or stop being rageful. No, your therapist is going to show you when it's appropriate to be enraged. When that rage is just an energy, how it can be channeled into something else, right? So that's exactly what they're talking about here. When you approach society with the energy of love, and you allow the instincts of our human nature to be the seeds of our growth, and we do that by working by literally working with each other, service, right? When you do that, you're going to be A-okay. That's basically what that whole thing was about. This next part is written by a spirit named Fenelon, and he said this in Bordeaux, France in 1861. Now, Fenelon says, love is the divine essence, and from the smallest to the greatest, you possess in the depths of your hearts the flame of that sacred fire. It is in fact that you have been able to prove over and over again the vilest individual, the most abject, the most criminal, holds for another person or some object a living and an ardent affection, impervious to anything that could diminish it, often reaching sublime proportions. I said, for another person or some object, because amongst you there are individuals who spend the treasures of the abundant love in their hearts on animals, plants, and even physical objects. Misanthropes of sorts who complain about humankind in general and resist the natural inclinations of their soul, which seeks affection and sympathy outside of itself. They reduce the law of love to the level of an instinct. But no matter what they do, they will be unable to repress the living seed that God planted in their hearts at their creation. This seed develops and grows with morality and intelligence. And although constrained by selfishness, it is the source of the holy and kind virtues which generate sincere and lasting affections, and which help you to travel the rugged and arid course of human existence. There are some to whom the trial of reincarnation is repugnant because it implies that others take part in the affectionate relationship of which they are jealous. Poor brothers and sisters, it is your affection that has made you selfish. Your love is confined to a closed circle of relatives and friends, and nobody else matters to you? Well, in order to practice the law of love as God intended it, you must progressively arrive at loving all of your brothers and sisters indiscriminately. The task will be long and difficult, but it shall be accomplished. God wills it. And the law of love is the first and most important precept of your new doctrine, because it is what will someday kill selfishness under any form in which it may appear. Because besides personal selfishness, there is also family and caste and national selfishness. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourselves. Now, what is the extent of one's neighbor? Your family, your sect, your nation? No, it is the whole of humankind. One more highly evolved world. It is the mutual love that harmonizes and guides the advanced spirits who inhabit them. And your planet, destined for impending progress by means of social transformation, will see its inhabitants practice this sublime law, the reflection of the divinity. This affects the law of love. The effects of the law of love are the moral betterment of the human race and happiness during earthly life. I mean, it's like a win-win, right? The most rebellious and the meanest shall reform themselves when they see the benefits produced by practicing this. Do unto others what you would want them to do unto you. On the contrary, do unto them all the good that is within your ability. Do not believe in the sterility and hardness of the human heart. In spite of itself, it yields to true love. Love is a magnet that it cannot resist, and contact with love enlivens and fertilizes the seeds of the virtue that lies latent within your hearts. As a dwelling place of trial and exile, the earth will then be purified by that sacred fire, and we'll see the practice of charity, humility, patience, devotion, self-denial, resignation, sacrifice, all virtues that are the offspring of love. So, do not tire of hearing the words of John the Evangelist. You know that when infirmity and old age suspended the course of his preaching, he did nothing but repeat these sweet words: "My little children, love one another." Dear brothers and sisters, take advantage of these lessons. Practicing them is difficult, but the soul will derive immense good from them. Believe me, put forth the sublime effort that I ask of you. Love one another, and you will see earth very soon transformed and made into an Elysium, where the souls of the righteous will come to enjoy their repose. So another layer we need to add to this, right, is this idea of reincarnation, right? So the seeds that we were talking about, the instincts that we were talking about of our base human emotions, these instincts that we build upon in each lifetime are then passed down to us, right? With each life, we're picking up where we left off, right? And same thing with our ancestors. When we do ancestral veneration, when we work with our ancestors, we're also working with those seeds that they themselves have helped to cultivate and grow within themselves, right? And we're assisting them to pick up where they left off, right? So this is all a very symbiotic situation between us and our spirits, between our spirits and other spirits, and between all of our spirits and God. And all the spirits of any living incarnate thing, like, you know, the planet Earth, or like animals and trees and shit, right? It all matters, right? So now we're at this next part, and this part was written, was said by the spirit of Sanson. He was a former member of the Paris and Spiritist Society in 1863. My dear co-disciples, the spirits present here tell you through my voice, love much so that you may be loved. This thought is so truthful that in it you will find everything that consoles and assuages the hardships of each day. Better still, by practicing this wise maxim, you will rise so far above matter that you will spiritualize yourselves before your earthly decease. Having developed within you the understanding of the future, Spiritist studies provides you with a certainty, your ascension towards God, with all the promises that respond to your soul's aspirations. You must also uplift yourselves high enough to judge things without the constraints of matter and not condemn your neighbor before having directed your thought towards God. I want you to pay attention to that last sentence. Listen to this. You must uplift yourselves high enough to judge things without the constraints of matter, meaning detachment. That is a Buddhist philosophy. You must be able to observe your world without falling into the trappings of feeling too much that it paralyzes you, right? It also says, and to not condemn your neighbor, and also being objective enough to not judge your neighbor, right? So you're objective with your own shit, you're objective with other people's shit, and you run your thoughts through God first before it comes out your mouth. Meaning, be mindful, say what you mean and mean what you say. Be very intentional with your words, and don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush. Nobody rush. If people want to hear what you have to say, they'll wait. In the deepest sense of the word, to love means being loyal, honest, conscientious, in order to do unto others what you would want them done unto you. It means searching around yourselves for the inner meaning of all the hardships that oppress your brothers and sisters so that you may bring them relief. It means regarding the great human family as one's own, because you will meet this family in a certain time on more advanced worlds. And the spirits who compose that family are like yourselves, children of God destined to evolve forever. And that is why you must not refuse your brothers and sisters what God has freely given you, because you, on your part, will be very happy if your brothers and sisters give you what you need. So always offer a word of hope and support to all who suffer, so that you may be holy, loving, and righteous. Believe that these wise words, love much so that you may be loved, will open the way for you. They are revolutionary and follow a steady and invariable course. But you have already gained much. You who listen to me, you are infinitely better than you were 100 years ago. You have changed so much from your own good that you have accepted without complaint a multitude of new ideas concerning liberty and fraternity, which you rejected before. And in another 100 years, you will easily accept ideas that as yet have not been able to enter your minds. Now that the Spiritist movement has taken such a big step, you can see how quickly the ideas of justice and renewal contained within the Spiritist dictations are being accepted by the average intellectual world. This is because such ideas respond to everything divine within you. It is because you have been prepared by a fertile seed, that of past centuries, which implanted within society the great ideas of progress. And since everything is linked together under the orders of the Most High, all lessons received and accepted will be contained in that universal exchange of love for one's neighbor. Through it, incarnate spirits, judging and sensing things more fully, will join hands throughout the confines of your planet. They will join with each other to understand and love one another, to destroy all injustices and all the causes of misunderstanding among people. The great concept of renewal through Spiritism, described so well in the Spirit's book, will produce the great miracle for the century to come, the uniting of all humankind, material and spiritual interests through the full understanding and application of this maxim: love much so that you may be loved. Now, before I move on to the next spirit, keep in mind, these are looked at as spiritual doctrines, right? If you ascribe to Spiritism as a religion, right? But there are some people in the chat or some people watching tonight who are not interested in the religion, but the philosophy, which it also is. And then there are some people who are not interested in the religion or the philosophy, but the mediumship aspect of it, which it is, right? So this is a very multifaceted system of thought. And so what I always say to people listening is take what you need, the rest, right? Whatever your motive is, whatever your goal is, take what you need from it. But I think the main chunks that we see here, the stuff that we are reading about love and laws and justice and all that, I think those pieces are so universal to the human need of understanding and the human's need to be understood, to love and to be loved, that you can take this with you wherever you go, right? And that's the hope, right? So now we're going to hear the Spirit's opinion about selfishness. What is selfishness to them, right? And the first discussion is going to be with the Spirit Emmanuel. And he said this in Paris in 1861. Selfishness, that plague on humankind, must disappear from the earth, whose moral progress it hinders. To Spiritism, the task is reserved of enabling Earth to ascend in the hierarchy of worlds. Thus, selfishness is the target at which all true believers must aim their weapons, their strength, and their courage. And I say their courage because more courage is needed to overcome oneself than to overcome other people. Let all of you, therefore, make every effort to fight selfishness within you. For that monster that devours all minds, that child of pride, is the source of all the miseries of the world. It is the negation of charity, and consequently the greatest obstacle to human happiness. Jesus has given you the example of charity. Pontius Pilate, that of selfishness, for while the righteous one was about to walk the holy stations of his martyrdom, Pilate washed his hands, saying, "What is this to me? This is a righteous man. Why do you want to crucify him?" Nonetheless, he let him be led to his execution. It is in this antagonism between charity and selfishness, it is to the invasion of the human heart by this leprosy that Christianity owes the fact that it has not completed its entire mission. It is upon you, the new apostles of the faith, and whom the high order spirits enlighten, that the job and duty of uprooting that evil has fallen, so as to give Christianity all of its power and to clear the way of the obstacles that hinder its forward progress. So to pause really quick, what he's saying here is he's almost speaking to the Christians directly. And he's saying, look, from a Spiritist point of view, selfishness is just the absolute, it's Satan, right? And we can prove this by your own book because of what happened with Jesus. Pontius Pilate himself was having this internalized war within himself between charity and selfishness with regards to Jesus and his crucifixion. He could have stopped it and he didn't. And it was because of that selfishness, right? And he's saying to the Christians, you guys could have gotten a lot farther, if Jesus had stayed alive. You guys could have completed your mission on earth that you wanted to complete had selfishness not gotten in the way, right? And so Spiritism is sort of here as like the second wave of this idea, and allowing those who adhere to the philosophy of Spiritism to be the ones to fight for justice and fight against selfishness, etc., etc. Uproot selfishness from the earth so that the earth can ascend the scale of worlds. For the time has come for humankind to don the toga of manhood, and to do so you must first uproot selfishness from your hearts. This next passage is going to be stated from the spirit Pascal. He said this in Sens, Paris in 1862. If people were to mutually love one another, charity would be practiced more perfectly. However, for this to happen, you would have to make an effort to free yourselves of that breastplate covering your hearts so that you may be more sensitive to those who suffer. Hardness kills good sentiments. Christ never rebuffed anyone. All those who came to him, no matter who, were never rejected. The adulterous woman and the criminal were both helped by him. He never feared that his own reputation would suffer because of it. So, when will you take him as the model for all of your actions? If charity were to reign on earth, evil would no longer have predominance. It would flee in shame. It would hide itself because everywhere it would find itself out of place. That is, when evil would disappear. You can be sure of it. Start by making an example of yourselves. Be charitable toward everyone indiscriminately. Make an effort not to pay any attention to those who regard you with disdain. And leave to God the burden of all justice, because each day in his kingdom, he separates the wheat from the tares. Selfishness is the negation of charity. Now, without charity, there will be no peace for society. I would state further that there will be no safety. With selfishness and pride, which walk hand in hand, life will always be a pathway for the shrewdest, a conflict of interest in which the holiest affections are trampled upon, where not even the sacred ties of family are respected. So now we are on the part of faith and charity. We're going to be listening to the Spirit's take on faith and charity. And the first spirit that we're going to hear from is the protector spirit. And this was stated in Krakow in 1861. My dear children, not long ago I told you that charity without faith is not enough to maintain among people a social order capable of making them happy. I should have said that charity is impossible without faith. Actually, you can find generous impulses even among persons who do not have a religion. But that austere charity that is practiced only through self denial, through a continual sacrifice of all selfish interests, can occur only if there is faith to inspire it. For nothing except faith can enable us to bear the cross of this life with courage and with perseverance. And mind you, again, because this is a philosophy as well, you can be an atheist and still think this way, because having faith in oneself, in one's ability to wake up every single day and do your charitable acts, to have the discipline to get up every single day and do that, is the same as having the discipline of going to the gym or brushing your teeth or cleaning your house, right? It's about discipline. Okay. And discipline comes from this idea that you must trust yourself. You must have faith in yourself to want to do the thing, right? If you don't trust yourself, if you don't have faith in yourself, you're not going to do the thing. You're going to be like, what's the point, right? Yes, my children, it is in vain that, eager for gratification, people delude themselves about their destiny in this world by pretending that it is permissible for them to concern themselves solely with their own happiness. Now, of course, God has created us to be happy in eternity. Meanwhile, earthly life ought to be used exclusively for our moral improvement, which is easier to accomplish with the help of the physical organs and with the material world. Without taking into account the ordinary ups and downs of life, the diversity of your tastes, your tendencies, and your needs, earthly life is also a way of perfecting yourselves by practicing charity. For it is only through mutual concession and sacrifices that you can maintain harmony amongst diverse elements. You would be correct, however, in stating that people are meant to be happy in this world if they would seek happiness not in material pleasures, but in the good. The history of Christianity tells martyrs who went joyfully to their deaths. In order to be Christian in your society today, neither death by martyrdom nor the sacrifice of your life is needed, but only and merely the sacrifice of your selfishness, pride, and vanity. You shall triumph if charity inspires you and if faith upholds you. That was a good one. Now the spirits are going to talk about charity towards criminals, right? So when we think about charity, do we get to pick and choose? We'll see, right? And this is going to be talked about by the spirit Elizabeth of France. She stated this in Le Havre, I don't know how to speak French, in 1862. True charity is one of the most sublime teachings that God has given to the world. Complete fraternity ought to exist among the true disciples of his doctrine. You must love unfortunates and criminals as God's creatures, to whom forgiveness and mercy will be granted if they repent, as is the case with you for the wrongs that you commit against his law. Regard yourselves as more reprehensible and guilty than those to whom you refuse forgiveness and commiseration, because quite often they do not know God as you do, and less will be asked of them than you. Do not judge. Oh, do not judge, my dear friends, for the judgment you render will be more severely applied to you, and you have need of indulgence for the sins you continually commit. Do you not know that there are many acts that are crimes in the eyes of God of purity, but which the world does not even regard as a light offense? True charity does not consist only in the alms you give, or even in the consoling words with which you might accompany them. Nope. This is not what God demands of you. The sublime charity taught by Jesus also consists in the benevolence always granted in all things toward your neighbor. You can even exercise this sublime virtue on many individuals who do not need alms, but who words of love, consolation, and encouragement will lead to the Lord. I will say once more that the times are near when widespread fraternity will reign on this globe. The law of Christ is what will govern humans, and the law alone will be the restraint and hope that will lead souls to the blessed realms. Thus, love one another as children of the same Father. Do not set up differences between you and those who are unfortunate, for God's wills for everyone to be equal. Therefore, despise no one. God allows great criminals to dwell amongst you, to serve you as a lesson. Soon, when people have been led to the true laws of God, such lessons will no longer be needed, and all impure and rebellious spirits will be regulated to lower worlds according to their inclinations. You owe to those of whom I speak the help of your prayers. That is true charity. You do not have to say of criminals, they are wretched, they must be expunged from the earth. The death that is inflicted on them is too kind for that type of individual. No, you must not speak like that. Look at your model. Jesus would say, what would Jesus say if he saw such an unfortunate person next to him? He would grieve for them. He would regard them as truly needy, sick persons and would extend his hand to them. You cannot do this in reality, but you can at least pray for them and assist their spirits in the few moments that they still must spend on your earth. Repentance may touch their hearts if you pray with faith. They are your neighbors just as the best individuals are. Like yours, their wandering and rebellious souls were created to become perfect. So help them out of their quagmire and pray for them. So I find this a very helpful passage because I often get asked by my students and by people that, they're so busy at work, or they have kids and a sick elder in the home or whatever, and charity and doing like volunteer work is just not in the cards for them, and they find themselves feeling like they have failed, or that they're doing the Spiritism thing wrong, or that they're not good Christians or whatever. And I always have to remind them, right, that never really was the thing. I mean, we do that because, again, the society we have in place, the systems that we have in place, the people that we have in power were of our own doing. Those people just so happen to turn out to be wretched and have created a system in where people are homeless, people are disenfranchised. So now it is our duty to be of service, to be charitable, and to try and help. But at the end of the day, as more and more people elevate, right, and as love gets practiced as a law, you will see less and less of these systems, right? When love is guided, that means justice is guided, right? And it means that now we have a sense of true justice, of true right and wrong, and people will uprise, right? People will fight for that. People will fight for justice. And systems that had once hurt us will now be broken down and we can start fresh, right? But in those instances, after we've broken everything down and started fresh and have been doing it for quite some time, this idea of charity becomes less about an action that you have to do for someone less in need and more about the types of prayers and the types of spiritual words that we speak upon our brothers and sisters. Because remember, words are powerful, right? What is the first thing that God does when the Bible starts, right? He speaks, right? He speaks upon. And so it's this idea of being able to pray for and speak for those who need elevation. Yeah, it's a great, I love that one. That's one of my favorites. Okay, we are on our last passage, the very last passage, which is perfect timing because then I'll be able to take any questions. So the last passage, the Spirit is going to talk about, should we risk our life for a criminal? So when we see a criminal who is suffering, if they are in a dangerous situation, or if they are a danger to themselves or potentially someone else, should we put ourselves at risk to help them? And the spirit that's going to answer this question is Lamanias, who is a spirit from France, and this question was answered in 1862. So a man is in danger of death. In order to save him, one must risk his own life. However, it is known that he is a criminal, and that if he escapes death, he will be able to commit more crimes. In spite of this fact, should one risk one's life to save him? Right? These are these philosophical, those deep questions, right? Let's see. The Spirit says, this is a very serious question indeed, one that a spirit naturally could face. I will respond in accordance with my moral advancement, right? Since the issue is whether or not one should risk one's life for a criminal. Devotion is blind. One lends aid to an enemy. Therefore, one must also lend aid to an enemy of society. A criminal, in other words. Do you think that you will only tear this criminal away from death? Perhaps it will be his entire past life. Consider the possibility that in those quick instants that drag the final moments of life from him, this lost man returns to his past life, or rather, his past life arises before him. Death perhaps is coming too soon for him. Reincarnation could be terrible. So rush to his aid. You, whom the Spiritist science has enlightened, rush to him and snatch him from his condemnation, and then perhaps the person who would have died cursing you will instead throw himself into your arms. You should not ask yourselves, however, if he is going to do so or not. Just go to his aid, because in saving him, you obey the voice of the heart that tells you, you can save him, so save him. So this is a deep thing, right? But really the rationale behind this is every person is capable of evolving, of growing, of becoming better, of turning a new leaf, right? And although this person happens to be a criminal, they still have a life ahead of them, right? Like this, if we have the means to save this person without putting ourselves, like if we know we can save them without dying, we should, because that might not be their moment to die. That might be their moment of epiphany. That might be their moment of getting severely injured, which causes them to then reflect on certain things. That might be you never know. But the point is that you as a spiritist, knowing the science that we talked about in the very first book, and knowing how the anatomy of spirit works, and knowing how reincarnation works now, allowing this person to die, knowing that you could have saved him, you have ultimately rendered that person to a reincarnation that is not going to be great for that person. And when you could have saved him and allowed him the opportunity to repent and make changes, and therefore when he dies and gets reincarnated, he has a better chance of going into something that is more for his growth and less for his punishment, if that makes sense. Even though technically, according to this philosophy, there's no punishment per se. But yeah, so that's the end of chapter 11, you guys. So now we have the last, couple of minutes to answer any questions you guys might have. Let me say hello to a few people. Hello, Vroom Vroom. Oh, I love that name. Thank you. Hello, Jasper. Hello to all the people on TikTok. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's see who we have here on YouTube and Facebook. Hi, Zelma, Xander, Miles, Mel. And then, of course, the Facebook user. I can't see your name, so I don't know who you are, but thank you. Let's see. Conference. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Lucy Progreso to you guys, too. So do we have any questions about what we just read, or any of the previous books that we read, or just Spiritism in general? We are here for the next few minutes. How did I not save this? It's so weird. Let me see. I really didn't save it? That's so dumb. Nope, no questions? Okay. Well, again, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight on Monday night. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. You know what to do. And I appreciate you all so much. Much love. This is how we grow. Bye, guys.